Welcome back to Orange Hat Reviews, everyone. Hope you're all having a wonderful day. So it is episode 94 of the Mystery Reviews. The hints I gave for this review throughout the week were the prequel to 71, which is the 71st Mystery Review. Dum Dum, as in Dum Dum to a name of a character. 3 70s, meaning 70 was referenced 3 times in the film. And the quote, "I had a date." Now, the absolute last final hint that I gave for this was I did a discussion of it last night with my hat crew on MCU Sundays. So, if you haven't guessed it, Pierre guessed it very good. And it is indeed Captain America, the first Avenger. So, before I get started with the review, let me say hello to the chat, and also if you're new here, make sure that you subscribe. If you haven't already, smash the like button. It really helps. Also share the stream out if you can. And Vanya, good to see you. Dabian Donaldson, how to do? Good evening from the UK. Orange, hope you're doing okay. Just watched your latest short. I agree with you. I'm looking forward to your new live review. Thank you so much, sir. Howdy Orange and all good folks. Good to see you, Neozoic and Sex Goth Girl. Good to see you. Always a pleasure. So, let's get into it, shall we? So, shortly after Thor was introduced in the MCU, a second movie was released to follow, Captain America, the First Avenger, directed by Joe Johnston and starring Chris Evans, Tommy Lee Jones, Haley Atwell, Sebastian Stan, Hugo Weaving, Dominic Cooper, Neil McDonough, Richard Armitage, Stanley Tucci, Toby Jones, and Samuel L. Jackson are all the top names in this film. Very good cast, if I do say so myself. I know I did a fun discussion of this last night. You can watch that. You can watch that on the Infinity Saga Sunday playlist. However, this is going to be less of a discussion and more of a in-depth review, plus a few little extras here and there. So, opening with the Shield finding Cap in the ice, then going back to Tonsberg, Norway in 1941, Schmidt finds the Tesseract in the church. Now, this scene played out very well. It had the guy who played Argus Filch from Harry Potter, and they are supposedly hiding something. The acting was good enough to sell that they were hiding something that will never be found. And considering that this movie was a Paramount film, there is a line in this scene, and the Führer digs for trinkets in the desert. That is a direct callback to Indiana Jones, so it's a nice little spin there. Now, Hugo Weaving as Johann Schmidt and the Red Skull, I gotta say, is a brilliant choice for a villainous role. And I really do think that he absolutely killed the role. They did a nice job with the scarring that they put at this point just under the earlobe on both sides of his face to let people know that there's not something quite right about his face, which we learn later is only a mask. And the Nazis trying to push open the sarcophagus with great difficulty and unable to do so, then he just comes up, slams the whole thing off, and there you go. That was a really nice establishment of how this man has super strength. So that in itself was interesting and very well portrayed. Then we basically understand exactly who he is when he rubs back here and moves his jawline like that. And then you also see the camera pan down to his badge, his Hydra badge, which is covered with blood, or specifically the skull of the badge. So you understand that this is the Red Skull, even though you don't or you haven't seen it yet. Now, we then see or go to Brooklyn, New York, where Steve Rogers and the body double Steve Rogers is this scrawny kid. Now, from what I understood from last night's conversation, they did two ways of making Steve Rogers skinny. They did the body double that was played by Leander Dini, and they did digital atrophy for Chris Evans, because Chris Evans acted out the role, and then they just put markers all over his body to slim him down because he was jacked up for the movie. Ryan Philippe and John Krasinski were considered the role for Steve Rogers, Captain America. Interesting. So we then get an idea that he is trying to enlist into the army, and he has a myriad of medical issues, history of medical issues, asthma, scarlet fever, rheumatic fever, sinusitis, chronic and frequent colds, heart palpitations, easily fatigued, heart trouble, nervous trouble of any sort, household contact with TB or tuberculosis, and a parent or sibling with diabetes. So they definitely deny him enlistment. And he's like, just give me a chance. You'd be ineligible on your asthma alone. Is there anything you can do? I'm doing it. I'm saving your life. However, this is Steve Rogers. He doesn't care about his own life. He wants to do what's right. He wants to, or as he says later on in the film, there are men laying down their lives. I have no more right to do any less than them. This movie was well written. The people who wrote this film, honestly, I think deserve an award for it because it was that well written. So we then get to the scene where there's the theater, and you see the wartime news reels that they did during the war, which was a thing back then. They played the war reels and the news reels before, or instead of the trailers for future films, you got the war reels, and how kids are even doing their best to help with the scrap metal. And of course, you got the bully who's saying, who cares, just play the cartoon. And you got all these other adults who are reacting to him in very distressed ways because they understand the severity of what's going on. And this guy couldn't care less. Well, Steve Rogers tells the guy to shut up. And, well, he ends up catching a beating for it. Now, we get the iconic line, I can do this all day. Because the bully just keeps on wailing on him until Bucky steps in, played by Sebastian Stan really well, and gives the dude a kick in the nuts on his way out. Now, Sebastian Stan is Steve Rogers' best friend in this movie, Bucky Barnes, James Buchanan Barnes, and he got his orders. He's going to be in the 107th, which was what Steve Rogers also wanted to be a part of because his father was assigned there. The story between these two, they play it so well that you know there is a big friendship between these two, and that they have been friends for quite a long time. It really is a great scene and a great rapport that Steve and Bucky have. And I think that Chris Evans, despite my real world issues with him and his insanity in the real world, I think he is a good actor when given the right roles. So is Sebastian Stan. So yes, this acting in this scene, plus the scene where they go to the World Expo, where you see Howard Stark, played by Dominic Cooper. Some people would say that it wasn't the best casting. However, I would honestly think as a young Howard Stark, that was a brilliant choice of casting. Dominic Cooper did a really good job. And he tries doing his little hover car experiment, works for a stretch, and then shorts out. And Steve decides to go to the enlistment center, try to enlist again. Well, Bucky is basically arguing with him. He's like, worse, they might actually take you. There are so many different things you could be doing. Or why do you feel the need to go over there? And he tells him, there are men laying down their lives. I have no right to do any more than them. Or do no less than them, rather. And Stanley Tucci comes walking around. He plays Dr. Abraham Erskine. And Abraham Erskine, the writing for Erskine and Steve Rogers is peak writing in this film. Erskine turns around when Steve goes in to enlist. And I really do like how the scene plays out, because he understands that this boy might run once the doctor leaves the room, so he sends in an MP to stop him. Not to apprehend him, but to just make sure he doesn't go anywhere. And the writing in this scene with Dr. Abraham Erskine. And he's like, where are you from? Queens, 73rd Street and Utopia Parkway. But before that, Germany. Does this trouble you? No, doesn't trouble me at all. Where are you from, Mr. Rogers? Is it New Haven or Paramus or somewhere else? And he's like, well, that might not be the right file. Because there is also the reminder on the wall, it is illegal to lie on your enlistment form. And Steve has been doing it in different areas. So it's like, well, there you go. He's like, it's not the rejections, it's the 5 tries that interests me. There are so many brave, strong soldiers. Maybe what we need now is a little guy. I can offer a chance, only a chance, but I ask again, do you want to kill Nazis? And he asks him, is this a test? Yes. The bluntness of Erskine is really great, where he basically tells him, yes, this is a test. Now, that does arm Steve with the ability to measure his answer before answering, but he still answers truth to the heart. True to the heart. I don't want to kill anyone. I don't like bullies. I don't care where they're from. And so he gets approved. Damian Donaldson, Toby Jones is great in this film. Yes, we're getting straight to that scene too, because that is another wonderful thing that they did with this film. Shortly after the Abraham Erskine and Steve Rogers dialogue scene, you have the next scene, which is the Red Skull and Dr. Arnim Zola. Now, they do pay a nice tribute to Zola's body in the comics, where he is a robot with his face on his chest, with a camera up for a head, with that scope that he was doing, and they're experimenting with the Tesseract. Now, the discussion last night kind of entered, does the Tesseract have some sort of sentience because of how they are using it and siphoning its energy in order to create destructive energy for their weapons? Well, it does make one wonder because of how the Tesseract reacts. Also, the stability at 70%, the first 70. And so, would you compare Hugo Weaving's Red Skull with the other roles such as Agent Smith, Megatron, Voice, Elrond, and V for Vendetta? Honestly, I think that this is one of his better roles. However, I would not say that it is better than V for Vendetta. V for Vendetta, he provides the voice and the action, yes, but you never see his face. I think that Hugo Weaving has great acting skill and honestly deserves as much praise to his acting as well. In Agent Smith, he plays an agent, but then an agent who has been freed because he becomes a virus. And Megatron, I believe he provides the great gruffest voice ever for Megatron, until Frank Welker takes place in the 4th movie as Galvatron. But yeah, I thought that, or I think that Hugo Weaving is truly a great actor. And one of the things I also do enjoy about the Tesseract, when you get a MacGuffin kind of movie, you need to give the MacGuffin, the item that is sought or is sought out, or people are seeking it. You need to give it some sort of presence. And instead of it being just being a shiny cube, this thing has a powerful aura sound. I can't even begin to imitate it with just my mouth alone, but that is something that is very clear that this is a very powerful object when they reveal it, and when he pulls it out and puts it in different places. It really is well done establishing that this item is incredibly powerful. The Tesseract is, in fact, an Infinity Stone, as we all know. And I feel that they did a great job expressing it in the film. So, having the exchange being stable, we then go to the introduction to Agent Carter and Colonel Phillips. Now, the basic training are in this film, where they show the different training exercises and Roger struggling. You understand that they set up his asthma because he's wheezing trying to climb the net. He's so frail and small he can barely crawl through the training course. The flag, he shows ingenuity and smarts, which is great. When he pulls the pin from the flagpole and it goes down, gives the flag over to the guy, and he's like, "Thank you, sir." Steve Rogers is the embodiment of humility. And while I have a big problem with Chris Evans in real life, his character, Steve Rogers, is a character that is humble. He cares about doing the right thing, even though the right thing is not what everybody else wants or says is right. Much like the comment he makes in the to Thanos in the comics. It is, or even when people are telling you what's wrong is what's right, it is your duty to plant yourself like a tree when everybody tells you to move, and say, "No, you move." To do what is right, even though others tell you that it's wrong. When you know it's right, in your gut, in your very core of your being, that is the kind of person Steve Rogers is. That is one of the reasons why I relate to him so much, is because of his humility. And so when Colonel Phillips, played brilliantly by Tommy Lee Jones, Tommy Lee Jones himself is a freaking legendary actor. And I know I'm going to get the question of Neozoic of the different characters he's played, like Two-Face and the Instructor in The Hunted and many other characters. Tommy Lee Jones, when he plays a character, he plays it in such a way that he could play himself, but also he just has a wisdom about himself. When he played Two-Face, he played two minds, two characters, essentially. And I think that he did a good job with it. When he played the Instructor from The Hunted, I believe that he played a person who is reserved, who cares, but also has to keep his caring down to a minimum. He's very direct, very blunt. In this movie, he plays a very condescending colonel, but also a very commanding presence as well with Colonel Phillips. And I think that Tommy Lee Jones's acting career throughout his entire career is also worthy of great respect. Tommy Lee Jones is a great actor. Haley Atwell playing Agent Carter, a lot of people nowadays would probably say a lot of what she's saying is woke. Well, no, actually it's not, because during the 40s, women were not given the same privileges as men in the United States anyway. In the military, or she is British intelligence in World War II, women were valued for their intelligence in Europe. So that does tell you something. And we also see that in Agent Carter and in the one shot that leads to Agent Carter that she is actually very disrespectfully underutilized until Stark calls her or calls to inform her that she's going to be leading S.H.I.E.L.D. with him. Now, but as it is right now, she's just one of the people that is part of the SSR, the Strategic Science, or the Strategic Science Reserve. And the grenade stunt, where it's like, you don't win wars with niceness, Doctor. You win wars with guts. And he tosses in a dummy grenade and yells, "Grenade!" Well, Steve, he thinks Steve would run. He jumps on the grenade. Well, Hodge, the one he expected to be to step in and handle it, he runs like a coward. Hodge was also the one who was giving Steve the biggest or a lot more problems, or breaking down the obstacle course, laughing while he's wheezing on the net and whatnot. So yeah, Gilmore Hodge, who also got a fist to the face when he was being very rude to Agent Carter. I thought that was a good scene too. This guy just seems to. I feel that there is a what if, or a Marvel what if there. You know, what if Gilmore Hodge was actually chosen? I feel like that would have been a good Marvel what if, instead of them going the route they did with the shows they did. Well, it is entirely true that in the what if he would have, or he wouldn't have been the right choice. However, he would have been the choice that was made. But yes, also Toby Jones, as Davian said, this was also a good scene where he, or his acting in this, he goes from a timid scientist who's working for the Germans to a full outright believer into Hydra, even though he is averse to watching all the destruction and death, because you'll see in his acting when the Red Skull goes nuts and kills the 3 Nazi officials, he actually is totally horrified by what he saw. So yes, Toby Jones was also a great one in this. Now, we then see that nice scene between Abraham Erskine and Steve after Steve has been chosen for the program. And Steve asks him, "Why me?" Well, you get some background on Erskine, how he denied Hitler his service until he was forced into it. And then he says it's the head of Hydra, who wants the formula for himself. And he takes it, but it wasn't ready, so there were side effects. And I love how they do the way they do the scenes, or the callbacks to what he was doing, or the flashbacks or whatever, where Schmidt pulls a gun on him and basically is telling him, "I need this because it's going to make me superior." Well, after he takes the formula, he took it in quite a different way than Steve. He just popped one needle into his arm and injected himself with it. Well, yeah, he got stronger, but there were other effects. And they show him starting to scream, and that's it. You don't know what the full effects were until later on. So that is a good way of establishing that there is something wrong with this man. So then we go back to, because we had a nice scene with Abraham Erskine and Steve Rogers, we go back to Red Skull and Arnim Zola, where Arnim comes in while the Red Skull's getting a portrait done, and he turns off the light because he doesn't feel that Arnim Zola is ready to see it yet. And he tells him, "I understand you found him. Take a look. You see the surveillance photos, so now you know there's somebody New York watching Erskine. So this is all great storytelling. And the order the order has been given. What the order is most likely, can be assumed, a kill order. Sabotaging the Allied forces' best chance at winning the war. So after that, we get to the process of Steve becoming a super soldier. And the nice scene between Carter and him in the car, and then leading into the lab, where Stark is helping out the Allied forces. Now, when they put him in there, and they start injecting him with the serum, you see Steve closing his eyes and then opening them really wide. That's actually a callback to the Incredible Hulk, which is reminiscent to when the Hulk starts to transform. Believe it or not, that's actually was the director's intent. And so then when they get him, or they close him into the pod, and they start hitting him with the radiation, he starts screaming at 70%, the second 70. And while the trailer shows the growth in the pod, where he's at the bottom of the pod and then he rapidly grows, I thought that was quite interesting. I think I did a couple of, or I turned it into a GIF on my Giphy page. If you go to my description of this stream, you'll actually see it. Go to Giphy and look into my profile, and you should be able to see the GIF if you scroll down a couple of notches. So he then becomes a nice super soldier, and this is where the theme for Captain America comes horns out, man. Alan Silvestri does the score for Captain America, the first Avenger, and his theme is very memorable. A lot of people say, "Oh, the MCU's music isn't memorable." I can always, or ever since the MCU started, I could remember Iron Man's theme from the MCU, Incredible Hulk's theme from the MCU, Captain America's, and Thor's. They were brilliantly done, and they were done by great composers. And when you hear Alan Silvestri's theme as the pod opens up revealing Super Soldier Steve, it really is well done. Richard Armitage plays the Nazi spy who was up in the booth playing as a person from the State Department. Turns out he was a Hydra plant. And he ends up blowing the booth after everybody's out of it, shooting Erskine, killing him. But before Erskine can or dies, he points to Steve's chest, which was a reminder of last night of his promise. I want you to promise that you'll always be a good man. And he taps twice on Steve's chest and then dies. Well, Steve obviously is going to go after him, and Peggy goes after him as well. Peggy manages or shows off that she is quite a marksman. And Steve, running barefoot through the streets of Brooklyn as a super soldier, I love how he ends up crashing into a window, because Steve is not used to his body. By them actually having him crash into a window and being off balance with his new body, that shows he's not a Gary Stu. He is a super soldier, yes, but he is fallible still. And he has to get used to this body, which is so freaking great. And he also does have a small healing factor, which is established later on in the film. His metabolism burns 4 times faster, so he can't get drunk. But also he does get shot under the arm here when he's or at the pier. Now, you see him holding it like this when he's running after the Hydra agent. And I love how this Hydra agent takes a kid hostage and then throws the kid in the river, and the kid's like, "Go get him, I could swim." And I'm like, oh, thank God. Because you never want to see a kid in danger, but they do a good job with it. And he stops the Hydra agent. The Hydra agent kills himself, but the serum is lost because he had the last serum thing and it shattered. Well, now Steve is the only super soldier and can only be the only super soldier. So, after that, let's see here. We get the scene of Schmidt killing the 3 Nazis because they feel that the Red Skull has been indulged long enough. And they discover that Schmidt actually sees Hitler as an enemy. Berlin is on his map of targets. And one of the nice things about the scene is where he points to all 3 of them, counting. It's like, okay, you got all 3 here. And how he does not like failing. When he misses one of the Nazis, you see him go, like he kind of just cringes a little bit because he's like, I didn't want to miss. This is nice little bits and pieces of the actor's choice or the director's choice, and I really do like how he does that. And he then makes his declaration. I'm sorry, Dr. Zola, but Hydra could no longer grow in Hitler's shadow. Hail Hydra. And we see that his men are absolutely loyal to him instead of Hitler. And he then turns to Zola, and Zola, now that he's been put on the spot, he yells Hail Hydra, but when Schmidt turns away from him, you see the shock and horror on his face. He's like, oh my God, what have I done? I've started building this, But eventually, he does become exactly who he's meant to be, which is truly loyal to Hydra, Zola. So then we get where Steve is denied service and instead turned into the face of the U.S. military by being a bullet bondsman, a weapons bonds. And we get the him on stage, the whole spiel. And I thought that they did that presentation very well. And how they developed him from reading the Shield at first to knowing his lines well out. How would you compare Joe Johnston's Captain America with other movies he's directed, such as The Rocketeer, Jumanji, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, The Wolfman remake, etc.? Honestly, I think that he did a good job with Jumanji. I think he did a good job with Rocketeer and Honey, I Shrunk the Kids instead of Shrunk the Kids, as you put it. But the Wolfman remake, I will probably do a review on that. If I haven't already, I think I did. But the Wolfman remake, there's the director's cut and there's the theatrical cut, in which the theatrical cut is actually a better cut because the director's cut makes a grave error by not shooting an alternate scene when he arrives at his father's estate. But that would be for that movie's review. I'll have to get that movie again for my digital collection because I have the physical copy. So, let's see here. We then see that he's in Italy at the front, 5 miles from the front. He's now performing for the soldiers. And the soldiers do not care for him. And you also see Hodge still being the prick that he always is. And they want to see the girls because these men have been through hell and they would rather like to see a little skin rather than some dude in tights, I mean, wouldn't you? I know I would. I would want to see some women, So, sorry, I have this annoying hangnail here. So then we see Agent Carter consoling him, and she's like, and do you think that is what you're meant to be for? A lab rat or a dancing monkey? Because she sees he's scrolling or sketching in his book. And I like the wittiness of Agent Carter when he says bond sales take a 10% bump in every state I visit. And she's like, is that Senator Brandt I hear? And I just love that line because it shows that she has the common sense that is admirable for people, or in anybody, really. And that's okay, Neozog. I understood what you meant. So once he learns that the 107th was his audience, he runs to Phillips and he's like, I need the casualty list for the 107th. You don't get to give me orders. I do love how that little lapse is like, I just am looking for one name, a Sergeant James Barnes. And when he starts to escort or ignore Steve is like, please, sir, could you just tell me B-A-R, I can spell. And one of the something that officers have had to do during World War II were the condolence letters. And he says, I have written more of these condolence letters that I have cared to write, but the name does sound familiar. I am sorry. And are you planning a rescue mission? Yeah, it's called Winning the War. They're 30 miles behind the lines. We couldn't get to, or in some of the most heavily fortified areas or terrain in Europe. We'd lose more men than we would save. But I don't expect you to understand that because you're a chorus girl. He continues to berate Steve. It's like, dude, you want a super soldier, you have a fucking super soldier. This is, while it is a good conversation and it shows the dismissiveness of Phillips, in this case, technically, this is bad writing. Because, as the senator said, you don't take a soldier, a symbol like that, and lock him away in a lab. You make use of him. All Steve ever wanted to do was serve his country. Phillips is not allowing him to. So Steve does the right thing. He decides that he's going to go on this, even if he has to walk to Austria to do it. And then he starts packing up some stuff, and Carter instead helps him. So we get the scene in the plane with Stark. I thought we'd go to Lucerne for a late night fondue. Steve, in his ignorance, does not know what fondue is. He thinks it's a whole different thing. So they drop him in because the ship comes under fire, and he ends up making his way into the Hydra camp. And he starts being the hero that he knows to be, but also he gathers intelligence. He takes one of the clips. If you are in an active military and you have intel that you believe the Allied forces need to know about, you collect it and bring it back, you know? We also get an introduction to the Howling Commandos, Dum Dum Dugan, Fallsworth. Now, if anybody knows anything about the Howling Commandos in Fallsworth and whatnot, you know that Fallsworth was the original Union Jack, the British super soldier, with a subpar serum, but one similar to what Steve had, I believe. Then they made Fallsworth's sister a weird cyborg vampire. But anyway, so you got Fallsworth, Dugan, and the rest. And I do love Neil McDonough, man, is a great actor. He's blacklisted in Hollywood right now because he's a Christian. He doesn't, and he won't do certain scenes because of his Christian values. But when he plays his characters, he could play a villain, he could play a hero, and he does a great job at it. When he's playing Dum Dum Dugan, my God, man, he is just a fun and great version of the character, who in the comics later becomes a commanding agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., which is great. So when he's has that handlebar mustache and no beard, it just works, you know? He could pull off the look great. Kenneth Choi, who plays I can't remember his damn character's name, I think Gabe or something like that. He's actually also in Spider-Man Homecoming, not as the same character, but as a different character. But it'd be cool if he actually turned out to be his own character's grandson in Spider-Man Homecoming. That would be cool. Or, grandson would be probably a good bet on it, because the Howling Commandos, except for Bucky, all live at the end. But the great line that is really in this is, "I've knocked out Adolf Hitler over 200 times." And they're all looking at him like, how the fuck have you been fighting Adolf Hitler and not killed him yet? You know? It is one of the funniest lines in the entire movie. And also, you also get the "I'm Captain America" bit. Now, he's looking for Barnes, and after Schmidt realizes they're outmatched, he ends up setting off timers to blow the place. If you are any sort of smart in an active war situation, you're not going to allow enemy forces to get their hands on what you're doing. So yeah, Zola goes to grab his designs so that they don't fall into enemy hands, and Steve Rogers finds Bucky. And Bucky, as a diligent soldier under heavy duress, still manages only to give up 3 things: name, rank, serial number. Those are the only things you are allowed to give up to an enemy, because they can't use it. They can't use anything of those 3. Your name and rank, okay. What can we do with that? Not much. So that is good writing there. And how he's like, what happened to you? I joined the army. I thought you were dead. I thought you were smaller. I mean, it's just a great scenes together with them. And then they run into Red Skull, and Red Skull gives the Agent Smith punch. For those of you who don't know what that is, watch The Matrix, where he immediately punches forward and pulls back. And that's one of the Smith punches. That's what he learned from The Matrix, you see. And we then see him pull off the mask, revealing the Red Skull. The makeup for the Red Skull is great. They also had to put tracking dots on the face to reduce the nose for the Red Skull, because obviously you can't take off a person's nose unless, well, that would just not be very appealing with a person with a skull that has a nose, you know? It just doesn't work. So we then get them split up, because you have that brilliant scene where Zola pulls the lever which splits the bridge, and they're both walking forward trying, like, God damn it, I want to still fight with this guy. But that was a brilliant shot, you know? So that's great cinematography. And he tells him, you're deluded. You think that you're just a simple soldier, but you're too afraid to acknowledge that we have left the mediocre world behind. Unlike you, I wear it proudly and without fear. Except that he always wears a mask in comics and whatnot when he's playing a character, Del Rusk, which is an anagram for Red Skull. And so, yeah. Funny how the Red Skull thinks he's superior to men, and yet he also sees other superiors as lesser when it came to mutants. He saw them as pure lesser. Much like everybody else, he thought of them as freaks. There was a game, small segue, folks. There was a game that I used to play on Facebook called Marvel's Avengers Alliance, that when the enemies, or the bad guys, the villains, who also include Magneto in the game, he turns good because he will not stay with the bad guys when he found out they were reviving the Red Skull, because the Red Skull hates mutants. So, yeah, when he turned on the Brotherhood of Mutants, you actually get him as a playable character. And I really did like Magneto. He was a great character in that game. He was a great character to use. So, further on, they escape the factory, and you think that Captain America is dead because he's trying to jump across the chasm of fire inside that facility as it's going up, and they show the fire engulf him. So you think he's dead, and Tommy Lee Jones as Phillips is telling the guy what to write. I forget what the word is. And that he has to declare Steve Rogers killed in action. Well, he then starts yelling at Carter. And he's like, can't touch Stark, he's rich, and he's the U.S.'s number one defense contractor. You are neither one. Orange Hat, how would you compare Chris Evans' role with his other roles, such as Human Torch, Fantastic Four, Casey Jones' voice? And I never watched that one. But I did like him in a movie, Rush, where there's a bunch of other specialized beings out there, and he plays one with telekinesis. Chris Evans is a good actor. Like I said, he's a great actor. I thought he did good as the Human Torch. He played an egotistical one, and that was basically what Johnny Storm was. He was an ego maniac. I thought he did a good job. A lot of people give Silver Surfer a bad score because Galactus is a storm cloud. Well, actually, Galactus is not a storm cloud. He is inside the storm cloud. If anybody ever paid attention to that movie, yes, you actually do see the outline of him in the damn storm cloud. That storm, yes, is basically reminiscent of him. But he is essentially a being inside of it. You can actually see him when the frickin' Silver Surfer tells him he's no longer going to serve. But as for Chris Evans, sorry, got sidetracked again. I thought that he did a wonderful job. Or as Johnny Storm. He's a good actor. Chris Evans is a good actor. He's just got a major ego problem in real world. He's an asshole in the real world. Much respect to him. I disagree with a lot of what he says. But when he attacks people and their sense of values over and saying that they're a bunch of bigots and whatever, you can't agree to disagree, I think you're an asshole. Taking a stand on what is right, when you know it's right and when you know what another person is doing is wrong, that's where I value it. You can agree to disagree to a point, but when you have to stand for what you stand for, you stand for what you stand for. So I'll give him props for that too, but unfortunately what he's standing for is destructive to the American dream. Moving on. After he rescues the 1,000 men, he skips out in the Medal of Valor with the Stan Lee cameo. I thought he'd be taller. And then he recruits the Howling Commandos, who helped him escape from the Hydra facility and helped the others escape with the Hydra facility. And we get the Scrawny Steve Doubles cameo. He is the barman. He's like, where are they all putting this stuff? And then the Peggy scene between him and Peggy and Bucky in the bar. And she's there saying Howard has some stuff that he wants you to try on. Well, next day he shows up, and Colonel Phillips' secretary decides to start kissing him, and Peggy ends up seeing this. So she's now pissed off at him. Good writing there. And she does a great job with the acting, too. I mean, when he finds the vibranium shield, and he's like, what do you think? She pulls the gun and just, without a word, pulls the gun and shoots 3 shots at him. And he's like, what the fuck are you doing, woman? The look on his face says it all. What the fuck are you doing? Trying to kill me? Yes, I think it works. So she puts this pistol down and walks by, glaring at him as she does. And it's like, holy crap. And we then get the war montage. Now, the war montage is a great montage. Now, he also carries a shotgun. He carries his shield. He also carries an M1 or an M1911A1 semi-automatic pistol, 45, and it's gunmetal and blue painted. Gotta love Captain America, man. He really does he takes his color scheme seriously. And I love the shield, the paint job on the shield as well. So we see the montage where he's working with the Howling Commandos, wiping out Hydra bases. Red Skull's pissed off about it. And we then get to the final bit where Red Skull's very ticked off at Zola. And Zola tells him, I'm just a scientist. I develop the weapons. I cannot fire them. Well, the Red Skull doesn't want to hear that, so he's like, finish your mission, Doctor, before the American finishes his. And when he sees a guy came forward, he's like, we fought to the last man. Well, once Red Skull pulls his weapon, Zola turns away because he knows what's about to happen, which is a great way, or which is true to his character. And the Red Skull kills his subordinate for it. So we then get to the final scene, which ends up with the loss of Bucky. This scene really hurts, man. People who lose friends in combat. I had my grandfather was in World War II. He was actually on Omaha Beach. Not the very same beach that was in Saving Private Ryan, but he was along one of the other sectors. Let me tell you, he would never talk about it. Not to me, not to anyone else, unless they were a war vet. And I once asked him one final time, what was it like back then? What can you tell me? He wouldn't tell me. The only thing he would tell me is Saving Private Ryan wasn't even half as accurate. It was far worse. That is pretty much all he would say. So, but looking back on my grandfather's memory, whenever I asked him that, he would be very dismissive of it. It's because I am literally asking him to relive some of the worst memories he ever had. Only now can I fully understand that. Well, as an adult, I fully understand it. So when Steve is drinking in the bar and realizes he can't get drunk, that's even a bigger kind of, this fucking sucks. I can't drink away losing my best friend. But Peggy offers the consoling measure of, did you believe in your friend? Did you respect him? Then honor him, then honor his sacrifice. He damn well thought you were worth it. And so at this point, Captain America has made a declaration of war solely against Hydra. I'm going after Schmidt one way or another, and I'm not going to stop until all of Hydra is dead or captured. And she says, you won't be alone. So we then get to the interrogation of Zola, and this is some great writing. Toby Jones is perfect in this role, especially in this moment. He is explaining his bit to Phillips, and Phillips tells him, you know that's nuts, right? The sanity of the plan is of no consequence. And why is that? Because he can do it. I mean, only the world itself will satisfy him. And he asks him, what's his target? His target is everywhere. And at this point, he's fully on Hydra's side. He's fully committed to Hydra. Even though he was captured, he's fully committed to Hydra, which Zola, it makes quite clear in The Winter Soldier, which I did a mystery review a while back. The assault on Zola's compound, or on Red Skull's compound, is great. I love the pursuit where where the bike that Stark gives him has all the nice little gadgets, and he gets caught after, and then chasing the Valkyrie. This movie has a great way of cutting the film together. Basically, good guys, bad guys, good guys, bad guys, good guys, bad guys, in ways of scenes. They cut it very evenly. This has an even cut of a film. Even editing of a film. And the pace is a very good pace as well. So when he goes after him, and they use the Hydra car, or the Schmidt-mobile, to catch up to the Valkyrie, he finally gets his kiss with Peggy. And he looks at Phillips. Phillips looks, he's like, I ain't kissing you. That's one of the best lines. It really is one of the best lines. So we get him on the plane. He has to stop a couple of Hydra goons from getting into their plane so that they can target the cities. And he sees the one for New York. So he's definitely not happy about that. So it's also the New York Hydra craft that gets released that he ends up having to fly around, which is pretty good coincidence because he's from Brooklyn. And I really do, those are nice little parallels, that they allow. So when he gets to the fight with Red Skull, Red Skull tells him, you could have had the power of the gods. Instead, you put a flag on your chest and fight a battle of nations. I have seen the future. There are no flags, not my future. So when he dislodges the Tesseract from the engine of the Valkyrie, the whole choreography of that fight is really good. But the exile of the Red Skull, I don't call it the death of the Red Skull, I call it the exile of the Red Skull, where he grabs the cube and the cube feels him unworthy for its abuse. The cube literally banishes him to the outskirts of Yggdrasil, to Vormir. You see Yggdrasil, the nebula that was from Thor from the credits of Thor, the nebula that is Yggdrasil, the World's Tree, which Yggdrasil was also mentioned in the beginning of this film, where there was the the wooden art piece. I forget what it's called. And he sees Yggdrasil, and that's where he found the cube in Norway. So Red Skull is banished from there, or to that planet, and we see the cube melt its way out of the ship into the ocean. But Steve doesn't know how to turn off an autopilot, apparently. He doesn't know how to, even though it does say in English, autopilot. So he decides to make a sacrifice. And Haley Atwell's character is listening to him, and he has the date for the Stork Club a week from that day. This scene was brilliantly played, where she knows what's about to happen and he knows what's about to happen, but they still are holding on to hope that it won't happen up to the last second, where the transmission cuts and she is left alone in that scene where she's left alone in the hangar command center. Orange Hat, how would I compare Captain America: The First Avenger with other World War II films such as Saving Private Ryan, The Great Escape, Dunkirk? Captain America and First Avenger, and out of these, and Saving Private Ryan are the two World War II films that I've seen. I also saw another one which was about a sniper who was going up against a German sniper. It had Rachel Weisz in it as well, and also had Ron Perlman. I can't remember that film's name though, but it was very well done. Where Saving Private Ryan is a masterpiece, this film is an Elseworlds of World War II, but still respectful to World War II. Steve's sacrifice led to the end of the war because defeating Hydra was a great big step to defeating the Nazis. Instead of having to focus on Hydra, the U.S. was able to focus on the Nazis. I hope that answers. So then we get to we then get to the SSR shutting down, and not shutting down, but basically relocating. And it is a touching scene where Carter is looking at the folder that says Captain America, and inactive is on the folder. She opens it up. She sees a picture of Steve, or a partial picture of Steve, and she pulls it out. It's the skinny kid from Brooklyn, Steve. It's skinny Steve, which shows you that she was not so much in love with bulky Steve. She was in love with Steve. Even before he had the serum, she was taking a liking to him. Enemy at the Gates. Yeah, that one. Thank you, Miyazaki. That was a good film, too. And this is very nicely understandable, too. Also, you see that Howard Stark finds the Tesseract and tells him to go to the next grid point, and it's like, but the energy signature stops here. There's no sign of wreckage. Just keep looking. I'm pretty sure that Howard Stark, if he would have gone 3 more grid points in, probably would have found the wreckage. Unfortunately, they would have told him no more after the second grid point search. Turned up nothing. He wanted to find him. We learned in Agent Carter that one of the biggest regrets of Howard was he couldn't find Captain Rogers. So we then see the victory, or VE Day, and it's a nice scene where you see the planes flying over, and you see the Howling Commandos toasting to Captain Rogers in an entire bar full of people celebrating. You see they are the somber ones because they lost one of their best friends. That is something that was expressed extremely well. Where everybody else is celebrating, you have those who are remembering the lost. And we then see Steve waking up in the hospital after the kids obviously playing as Captain America and the Howling Commandos. Well, Steve then wakes up in the hospital and he's listening to a baseball game playing nearby. And Amanda Rigetti from The Mentalist, great actress. She was called in for this small bit scene and dolled up to look like it was still 1940s. And he's like, where am I? You're in a recovery room in New York City. He listens to the game again. Where am I really? The game, it's from May 1941. I know because I was there. Now I'm going to ask you again. Where am I? She's like, Captain Rogers, who are you? Well, then the SHIELD guys come in because she used the pen to trigger the alarm. It's like, this ain't going to work. And he escapes into modern Manhattan. where there is the scene with Nick Fury. And we get the third 70, where he's like, you've been asleep, Cap, for over 70 years. And he is, oh, that is okay. Or I'm about to end anyway. Have to head out, take care of Orange. Everybody in check. Good day, good luck, peace out, and stay safe. Thank you, sir. Anyway, the extended scene of this scene where he tells him, he's like, what, did we win the war? Hell yeah, we won. They absolute surrendered. Beating Hydra was a big part of that. And I know that the world still needs you, Cap. There's a place for you here if you want. And he's like, all right, well, when he looks away, are you okay? Yeah, it's just I had a date. And then they cut to the credits. Scoring for this film. Objectively, you have some good writing points, you have some bad writing points. This film has some great CG, but also has some lacking CG. I would say this film is solid 8.5 objectively. Subjectively, it's a 9.5. There are some scenes I think they should have kept in or extended even. Moviegoer, it's a 10 out of 10. Definitely a 10 out of 10. Hints for next week, folks. Hints for next week. Best CG to come out of Japan. There's your hint. I will drop the other hints as the week progresses. Thank you so much to Nia Zoic, to Davian Donaldson, Christian Freites, Sexy Goth Girl, and Vanya. Stay tuned for next week. I will be back on the normal schedule. And next Sunday will not be having the Infinity Saga Sunday because it's Mother's Day. Tuesday night, I will be on the Barroom Podcast with Society Reviews and them. But yeah, thank you all so much for tuning in. Y'all are amazing people. Have a wonderful day, and always remember, stay humble.